Pixar used to guarantee box office magic. Now they are struggling to fill theaters. Every release was once a cultural event, earning critical acclaim, audience love, and massive profits. Today, their animated adventures get lukewarm reviews, and most viewers barely notice when a new one drops. So, what went wrong? How did the studio, once synonymous with quality, fall so far? Could this be the beginning of the end? We're revealing why Pixar is failing on this episode of The Infographic Show. It's not often that anyone has an impeccable reputation in Hollywood, but for a while it looked like Pixar might just break that rule. The animation studio burst onto the scene in the 1990s, and they quickly shook up the world of cartoons like no one expected. It was all due to one little thing: computer animation. Co-founded by Steve Jobs, the studio worked with state-of-the-art technology to take a lot of the hard work out of traditional animation. Their early efforts focused on short films and were rough around the edges, but the tech was impressive. So inevitably, they shifted their focus to the world of features. And to say it was a success would be an understatement. Toy Story debuted in 1995, and it was a runaway hit. The tale of an old cowboy toy whose status as a boy's favorite is challenged by a flashy new space ranger was met with acclaim for both its stunning animation, its clever plot, and engaging supporting cast members like those little green men. Sure, the animation on the human characters was a little creepy, but as a first effort it was stunning, and the box office reflected it. Pixar's partnership with Disney was off to the races, and from there, it would be one of the most meteoric rises in history. Pixar immediately started cracking on its follow-up to Toy Story, A Bug's Life. While this Magnificent Seven-influenced adventure focused on a ragtag group of bugs going to war against an evil grasshopper army didn't quite reach the box office highs of Toy Story, it was still a success, and other studios like DreamWorks were quickly getting in on the computer-animated game now. Many people argue Pixar as we know it really began with Toy Story 2 in 1999. The sequel to the 1995 hit brought in a new cowgirl character with a heartbreaking past. Making audiences cry would become a regular occurrence for Pixar in the years going forward. But you can't build an animation empire with one man. The first 3 Pixar movies were all directed by Pixar co-founder John Lasseter, who became the company's chief creative officer. But as Pixar stepped up its output, the company would turn to some of its other founders and acclaimed animation creators. Monsters, Inc., about a pair of friendly monsters who work as professional scarers to collect energy from kids' screams, put Pete Docter at the helm. Meanwhile, Finding Nemo, about a clownfish father trying to save his son who is lost across the world, gave the wheel to Andrew Stanton. Both were massive hits, as was The Incredibles, a retro sci-fi adventure by Iron Giant director Brad Bird, which many called the best superhero film ever made. This would be the start of Pixar taking bigger risks, but the higher you rise, the further there is to fall. While all of the Pixar movies were distributed by Disney during this era, the company didn't own them. Pixar was independent, and they wanted more creative freedom. In 2006, they put out the creatively mixed effort Cars by Lasseter, which had many people wondering how its world of talking autonomous cars with no people actually worked. However, despite the quibbles, it was a massive hit and a marketing giant. But their next effort, Ratatouille by Brad Bird, wasn't Disney's speed. They actually planned to release it as their first independent film, and many people wondered if this was the beginning of the end for the Disney-Pixar partnership. But Disney had deep pockets, and it doesn't take no for an answer. Disney officially purchased Pixar in 2006, and this would kickstart the company's most dominant era. Ratatouille was a smash hit, despite anyone squeamish about vermin in the kitchen. That was followed in 2008 by Stanton's Wall-E, and the following year, Doctor broke everyone's hearts with Up, a melancholy tale about an old man trying to fulfill his late wife's last wish by flying his house to South America. And the 2010s kicked off with Lasseter returning for Toy Story 3. All 4 movies were smash hits, and all 4 won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, an unprecedented streak. The latter 2 were even nominated for Best Picture. But all streaks have to come to an end eventually. Today, Pixar is seen as a shadow of its former self, and the 2010s are the main culprit. Cars 2, released in 2011, put the wacky tow truck sidekick into a bizarre spy plot, and it was the studio's first true critical bomb, although it still made plenty of money. Their first whack at the princess genre, Brave, got mixed reviews and had plenty of behind-the-scenes drama, as the studio's first female director, Brenda Chapman, left mid-production. Dan Scanlon's debut for the studio, Monsters University, was a popular prequel that looked into the origins of Mike and Sully. Although its moral of, well, sometimes you just can't achieve your dreams, definitely caused mixed reactions. The studio was still riding high, but there were some storm clouds on the horizon. The rest of the 2010s was a mixed bag, with the studio having their next big original hit, Inside Out. But that same year, it had its first outright bomb, In The Good Dinosaur, a critically panned story of dinosaurs in the modern era interacting with early humans. The movie went through several rewrites and directors before limping to the finish line. 2 franchises returned, with Finding Dory being a massive hit, but Cars 3 brought that franchise to a sputtering halt. But it was nothing compared to the drama behind the scenes. For a while, John Lasseter was Pixar. As one of the founding fathers and the creative power behind its most iconic franchise, he was one of the most respected men in Hollywood. But behind the scenes, it was a very different story. It was known that he had a domineering personality and he could be hard to work with. But what wasn't known until 2017 was how he treated the people he worked with. Amid a national reckoning for Hollywood, stories started to come out about the Pixar honcho's inappropriate workplace conduct, both verbal and physical. At first, the company tried their best to take action without losing his talent. But as more stories came out, it was clear he had to go. Lasseter was fired from Pixar in 2018, and the company's rumbling under the surface would turn into a full-fledged earthquake. And from there, it would be like Disney's iconic parks, a roller coaster. There was good news for the studio in the latter part of the 2010s, with the studio having an original hit in Coco, the company's first musical. Its story of a Mexican boy untangling family secrets in the afterlife was highly acclaimed for its diversity and surprise villain. Then the following year, the studio had its biggest domestic hit ever with The Incredibles 2, as Brad Bird returned to catch up with the superhero family. The following year, the studio dropped Toy Story 4 to close out the series, for now, with Josh Cooley replacing Lasseter. While it was a huge hit at the box office, it also drew more controversy than any other Pixar film for its ending. Pixar's future was uncertain, but that was nothing compared to what the world looked like. Dan Scanlon's next film, Onward, was meant to be a deeply personal film about him grappling with the death of his father that he never really knew, as told through the perspective of 2 elf brothers in a modern world of monsters and magic. But its debut was overshadowed by real-world events, COVID-19, which drove down the box office for weeks, ended its run after less than a month, and threw the future of movie-going into doubt. This was also the era where streaming service Disney Plus debuted, and Pixar made the controversial decision to start sending its movies to streaming while theaters were closed. And it went on much longer than anyone expected. If you ask people what the biggest contributor to Pixar's downslide was, it's probably this. They released not 1, but 3 movies direct to streaming, and it may have gotten people out of the habit of seeing them as must-see movies on opening weekend. The 3 releases were all well received, with The Melancholy Soul, about a struggling musician who winds up in the afterlife, having Doctor on board and winning the Academy Award. Luca and Turning Red were both popular, although many people wondered why they weren't going to the theaters by then, as many top movies were already being released. And when they returned to theaters, it wouldn't go as planned. The studio tried for a safe landing, as it made its next entry in 2022, returning to the world of Toy Story, sort of. Lightyear was an in-universe storytelling of the origin of the real Buzz Lightyear that the toy was based on, and bringing in Captain America himself, Chris Evans, to voice the lead character. The result was Pixar's biggest bomb ever. Critically drubbed for its confusing, depressing time travel story and strange twist regarding Buzz's nemesis, Emperor Zurg, it was the first movie that actually made people ask, is Pixar washed up? And it hasn't been smooth sailing from there. Their 2023 follow-up, Elemental, was praised for its visual sense, but raised comparisons to The Strange World of Cars. But their fortunes were buoyed by Inside Out 2, a massive smash that saw new and troublesome emotions enter the console as Riley, now a teenager, grappled with the changes that puberty and growing up brought. It not only became Pixar's top movie ever, but the top animated feature in the domestic US market of all time. But to have hit sequels, you need to have hit movies. A big part of Pixar's success has been that it's always been seen as for everyone. Few of its movies raised any controversy, with messages that were seen as universal. But as time marched on, people wanted more representation, and Pixar's first efforts at featuring non-white leads went over well in Coco, Soul, and Turning Red. But their efforts at representing LGBTQ+ characters ran into more controversy from both sides. Gay characters in Onward and Lightyear were derided for having such limited screen time. Then Disney cut a trans character storyline from their first TV series, Win or Lose, which focused on a middle school softball team. And all these problems would converge on one movie. Their 2025 release, Elio, was where the worries about Pixar went from a beeping smoke detector to a 5-alarm fire. The story of a troubled orphan boy who gets abducted by aliens and convinces them that he is the Earth's ambassador got mixed reviews and tanked at the box office, opening in third place behind the second week of How to Train Your Dragon's remake and an R-rated zombie film. And then behind-the-scenes reports leaked that the movie had been heavily rewritten to remove any reference to the main character being potentially gay or gender non-conforming. This led to the departure of the original director and one of the voice actresses. It was a massive black eye for a studio division that really couldn't afford any more. The company has learned its lesson from some of its recent struggles, and the answer is more sequels. Soon after the monstrous success of Inside Out, they announced Toy Story 5, which will focus on the toys doing battle against a sinister tablet that now controls the attention of their new owner. Coco 2 and The Incredibles 3 were also announced, although no plot details were revealed, and Ratatouille 2 is reportedly in the early stages of development. To which many people wondered, is the era of Pixar originals over? Well, the studio has announced 2 new originals: The Bizarre Hoppers, about a girl who transfers her mind into a robot beaver to interact with the dam-building critters, and the newly announced Gatto, about a black cat in hock to the Italian cat mob. The latter's first look got positive reviews for its unique animation style, but no one knows if Pixar can win its old place atop the animation heap back. Not only has its box office declined, but it hasn't won a Best Animated Feature Oscar since Soul in 2020. And a big part of that is, there's a lot more competition. When Pixar debuted, it was the only game in town for computer animation, and it largely just had to compete with Disney, which was a friendly alliance. But since then, the animation field has exploded, and Pixar doesn't look as special anymore. And since the buyout by Disney, there's been a lot more crossing of the streams between the two, with many people saying Disney movies like Zootopia and Wreck-It Ralph feel more like Pixar movies than Pixar's recent efforts. Disney also has the mega-successful Frozen franchise, of course, which sucks all the air out of the room every time a new one debuts. And then there are the newer kids in town. DreamWorks might have launched with traditional animated features like The Prince of Egypt as its bread and butter, but it soon broke out into the A-list with the mega-hit Shrek franchise, which is still going strong 20 years later. While the company was derided for a while because of its reliance on celebrity voice actors and physical comedy, it spawned quite a few hit franchises: How to Train Your Dragon, Kung Fu Panda, and The Bad Guys among them. The company got massive critical acclaim and Oscar noms for the recent Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and The Wild Robot. But another company proves that you don't need acclaim to be a smash hit. If you ask little kids what their favorite animated character is these days, they're most likely to just start screaming banana. And that's thanks to Illumination Entertainment. The producers behind the Despicable Me and the Minions franchises created a reliable reputation for success with broad, wacky comedies that appeal to little kids. But they have built a fan base far beyond that. They recently got the license to the Super Mario Bros. Franchise, and the first movie in their new series was their biggest hit ever. And it's not just the classic rivals beating up on Pixar, it's the new guys. Sony Pictures Animation, which was seen as a side player in animation for the longest time, burst into the A-list with the Spider-Verse movies, taking the popular Spider-Man franchise and sending it on a multiversal adventure with hundreds of guest stars. They also have a reliable partnership with Netflix, where they recently had a smash hit with the offbeat South Korea-set musical K-pop Demon Hunters. The monster-hunting girl group Huntrix has become the biggest breakout stars in animation in recent years, something Pixar can only dream of right now. But it's not just the box office where Pixar is struggling. Its shine is wearing off with critics as well. 2024 wasn't a bad year for Pixar at all. Inside Out 2 was a massive hit, and they were on track for another Oscar. But along the way, The Wild Robot surprised everyone and was seen as a contender, only for them both to lose to Flow, a post-apocalyptic silent movie from Latvia starring a lonely black cat. This was one of the biggest upsets in animation history, and it made people think that Pixar's biggest fans might see them as over. When Pixar started out, it was the cool, clever upstart, but now people might see it as old hat, with nothing new or exciting, say compared to indie animation. But how can they get their mojo back? Pixar is still a powerhouse in terms of public recognition, but it's never quite reached the level of its partners at Disney, and you can see that with their presence at the theme parks. This is usually the gold standard for which properties Disney is big on investing in at the moment. Pixar's biggest cash cow franchises, Toy Story and Cars, have a significant presence at the parks, with self-contained lands of their own. Monsters, Inc. will join them at Disney World soon, with a few others like Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, and soon Coco having smaller individual rides themed to them. But that is still a minority of the studio's output, with some of the most acclaimed and popular Pixar movies ever, like Wall-E and Inside Out, having minimum or no theme park presence. But if you ask some people, that's a good thing. Pixar's been rather hesitant to milk its franchises outside of the core movies. They've only had a few spin-offs, the cartoon Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, and the Cars spin-off movies Planes, and they were produced by Walt Disney Television Animation and Disney Toon Studios instead of Pixar, and both are largely forgotten now. They tried again on Disney Plus with Monsters at Work, the first official sequel set after Monsters, Inc., and had more success, but they're primarily focused on the theatrical releases. Fans hope that the upcoming sequels and originals will help them get their groove back. But others are asking, is it time for a change? Since Lasseter had been fired, Pete Docter stepped up as the new chief creative officer. As he was behind some of the biggest Pixar hits, expectations were high, and the slide under him was unexpected. While a few people have asked if it's time to bring Lasseter back, he's seen as far too much of a liability. His comeback attempt at Skydance Animation has not been met with good reviews for its debut features, Luck and Spellbound. Plus, his record was hardly spotless at Pixar. He directed all 3 Cars movies after all, so could the problem be higher up? The return of Disney head Bob Iger to the company, replacing Bob Chapek, was met with rejoicing. Iger is one of the longest-serving Disney bosses, and he was responsible for the wildly successful Marvel and Star Wars franchises. However, increasingly people accused him of being too risk-averse and too reliant on sequels and nostalgia. His contract will be running out soon for the 3rd time, and he is likely to handpick his own successor. Many people hope it'll be someone from the animation sector instead of a finance guy like Chapek. But sometimes, when you lose people, it's hard to get them back. There is no more powerful tool in movies these days than nostalgia. Disney leans hard into it lately with live-action remakes, and many Pixar fans are dreading the day a Toy Story remake gets announced. But there is a method to Disney's madness: to remind people who saw the movies as kids of how much they loved them, and to get them to take their own kids to the movies. And Pixar used to excel at this, particularly with the way its movies often grew with the audience. Toy Story aged its human characters almost in real time, taking toy owner Andy from a little boy to a college student. Similarly, Inside Out did a smaller time jump, but countless fans who were Riley's age when the first movie came out deeply related to her struggles in her teen years. But that well might be running dry. Many of Pixar's movies don't lend themselves to sequels. Several have key actors that have passed away, like Up's beloved Ed Asner. And some time jumps don't always work. After all, Ratatouille's Chef Rat probably only had another year or 2 to work its magic in the kitchen before he was off to that great rubbish bin in the sky. Which means that the company has to create new franchises to get that same nostalgia for a new generation. And that is easier said than done. The price of going to the theater has never been higher, especially for families with multiple kids who want concessions, and that means that people have higher standards for what's worth seeing. Because there has never been a bigger competition for talent than there is right now. Not only do animation writers have their choice of studios to pitch their work to, but it's become increasingly possible to go your own way. The hottest animated properties out there right now, like The Amazing Digital Circus, started their life as indie projects on YouTube. And after hearing about the behind-the-scenes drama on projects like Elio, doing it yourself might start to look more and more appealing rather than pitching it to Disney, especially with crowdfunding helping with the financial burden. And that has left Pixar facing increasingly uncertain waters. The studio behind Toy Story isn't going anywhere. It's still one of Disney's most established brands, and one hit sequel can fund the next 5 originals. But competition is only growing. The creative future is uncertain, and the newest generation may not be as invested in the studio's output. Pixar started out as the company that revolutionized animation, but now it might face a humiliating fate, being just another studio in the crowd. And if you think Pixar's troubles are bad, just wait until you hear what's gone down at the happiest place on Earth. Check out totally messed up things that have happened at Walt Disney World, or click on this video instead.